Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Betting for Beginners. I'm Teddy Covers. That's Minty Bets. Just kidding. I'm Minty Bets. That's Teddy Covers. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how to win at betting sports. Teddy's going to give us 3 tips on how to win at betting sports, and we're actually going to go over 5 of the main sports that Teddy handicaps. In order, it's going to be MLB, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the NFL. We only have half an hour, Teddy, so we'll keep it pretty simple for everyone, okay? Now,
I'll do my best.
Teddy, in any sport, in general, what are your tips for just winning at sports betting in general?
Top 3. Lawrence is singing in my ear.
Oh my God.
And of course, it's not one of these deals that we can redo.
I hear it now too.
Yeah. It's, as long as you guys can hear Lawrence, it's fine. All that said, it does make for compelling programming to have people singing in your ear when you're trying to talk about how to beat sports in a serious way for beginning bettors. So let's start with any sport. Number 1, my number 1 rule, bet sober. I mean, really, you know, if you're Lawrence, you're really starting to piss me off. If you keep going, I'm going to end the podcast. Number 1, bet sober. All right.
Hey, I've heard of a lot of like drunk stories.
Yeah,
like betting drunk stories. Awful.
Sure, and it's not. I mean, whether you're drinking, whether you're smoking, whatever it is, your intoxicant of choice.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the night, when you've had 15 of them, it's not a good time to be making big bets. Okay, so bet sober. Number 2 is don't tilt. I mean, if you talk about the basic rules for sports betting, the biggest mistake that beginning bettors make is they'll bet $20, $20, $20, $5,000, $20. I mean, you know, the spreads are enormous between their small size bets and their big size bets. And when we say don't tilt, that means that you're not trying to get everything back after you had a tough beat. You're not trying to win it all back in one bet. It means you're not going to dramatically increase your unit sizes or the number of bets you're making when you're losing as opposed to winning. And of course, I mean, line shop. I mean, this is something we're going to talk about for every single sport. But you can't beat this if you're not, I'm not saying you have to get the very best number every time. But if you're consistently not getting the best of the number, getting the worst of the number, having point spreads move against you and laying -3 when you could have laid -2. Sober, don't tilt, line shop. And the last thing, for any sport, bet on good teams and bet against bad teams. Bet on hot teams, bet against cold teams. I mean, some of these concepts aren't ridiculous to figure out. They're not all that difficult. And the concept bet on good teams and bet against bad teams, a lot of wise guys don't necessarily do that. So you'll find some value oftentimes betting on the good teams and betting against the bad teams, even though in theory, the value is not supposed to be there in those spots. It is.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff, Teddy. Thank you. So in our last episode, we covered the basics of betting baseball, and we've got people asking to post more betting tips on baseball. So Teddy, give us 3 winning betting tips for the MLB.
Well, let's start with number 1, which is understanding the markets. All right. A lot of people don't seem, you know, why is this line where it is? They're only -130. Why aren't they -280? Advanced metrics dominate the baseball betting markets. Pitching is the number 1 factor. And it's not about wins and losses. It's not about ERA. It's about the advanced metric stats. The BABIP, batting average and balls in play. The strikeout to walk ratio. Your line drive rate. Your OPS allowed. Your FIP, fielding independent pitching. Your XFIP, you know, which is adjusted fielding independent pitching. Those are not stats that casual fans are necessarily familiar with.
Right. Everyone looks at the pitching and their ERA, and that's about it, basically.
Sure. Those are the stats that affect every single line in MLB. And it comes down to pitching matchup versus pitching matchup. When you talk about how lucky they've been, how good they've been, the advanced metrics tell a better story than win-loss and ERA, and the markets fixate on advanced metric stats. So understand in the betting markets, starting pitching is paramount. And it's not about any other thing for the starting pitchers than what do the advanced metric stats say they should be, not what they've actually been. So that's my number one for MLB. Understand the markets, understand why teams are priced where they are. Number two in MLB, I mean, more than any other sport, note that one game affects the next game. All right. Was the bullpen used up last night? Did they use their key arms out of the pen? Or are they all fresh for the next game? Is this a hot lineup coming in? Is this the giveaway game of a 3-game series? Hot bats stay hot until proven otherwise. Same thing with pitching staffs that are on a roll. So there's more than any other sport. Baseball, what happened last night affects how the next day is going to be played. So Absolutely. Be aware of that. The openers aren't necessarily, MLB openers come before the game was played the night before. So a lot of times you can take advantage after the opener's been bet of something that happened in the previous night's game that gives you an edge one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Okay, and what's the last one?
Oh, last ones. I mean, and we're going to talk about this a lot today. My number one tip for beginning bettors in any sport, ride the streaks. Okay. Bad teams are going to get hot. Good teams are going to get cold. 162-game NBA and MLB season, it's endless. You're going to find lesser teams that go on good runs. You're going to find good teams that get cold. And boy, when you talk about totals, when a team wins 10 in a row, the lead story on SportsCenter. When a team goes over the total 10 games in a row, nobody notices. All right.
Right.
Total streaks absolutely have correlative properties.
Mm-hmm.
Unders beget more unders. Get more hot line stays hot. A bad pitching staff and an overworked bullpen will remain that way until proven otherwise. A cold lineup's going to stay cold until proven otherwise. A pitching staff that's on a roll and the bullpen's not getting used is going to stay hot until proven otherwise. So these streaks genuinely feed off themselves, especially with totals in MLB. So understand the markets. Note that MLB one day affects the next day more than most sports, and ride those streaks. Those are my top 3 tips for betting baseball.
Love it. Very streaky sport indeed. Next up, we've got the NBA. NBA is not a sport I personally enjoy betting on because most of the time you could be covering the entire game, and then the last minute it just screws you over. So also NBA is about load management. So sometimes these teams and players will show up and sometimes they don't. So Teddy, give us some advice on how to bet on the NBA.
All right. NBA, I mean, the number one betting 101 advice for NBA is note the spots. You're going to face teams on back-to-backs. You're going to see them 4 games in 5 nights. You're going to see them first game back off a long road trip is a classic flat spot at home. You're seeing, all right, well, we've got the Lakers today, and then we got the Kings, then we got the Clippers on Saturday. The sandwich spots where, especially if it's chalk. Oh, yeah, we got these 2 step-up games, and we're laying 15 in the game in between. The spots absolutely are the way to start betting NBA. Okay. Note the bad spots, note the focus spots for teams, and you'll be able to find initially some bet on or bet against squads. The markets do react to the spots. They often don't react enough. When you have 4 games in 5 nights, your first game back off a long road trip, that's not a bet on spot. The markets often don't adjust quite enough.
Interesting. All right, number 2.
Well, I mean, my second tip for, betting 101 tip for NBA is identify teams at the best and worst roles as quickly as you can. So this is 2020, we're right of a disease-induced lockdown. All right. But we can go back and look what happened at the beginning of the season. Geez, the Lakers started out, they went on the road from day one. Monster road team. The Sixers on the road from day one. Miserable road team. 2 really good teams. You bet on the Lakers every road game, you made a bunch of money. You bet against the Sixers on the road, you made a bunch of money. If you can identify them early, you can ride them indefinitely. All right. OKC, great underdog. All they've done all year is cover as, the Thunder covering as a dog. The Cavs have been favored 6 times. They haven't covered any of them. I mean, if you can identify these spots early, you can cash with them again and again. And in particular, I'm not just talking on the road, in a bad spot at home, off a win. All right. The Bulls, awful off a win. The Spurs, awful off a win. Off a loss. Clips, great off a loss all year. Heat, et cetera, et cetera. When you find these roles, you can cash with these teams in these roles again and again and again. And oftentimes they show themselves early, October and November. Hey, this team's getting something done. You can ride that same trend or angle or streak for half a year sometimes.
I love it. Love it. Okay, the third and last one for Betting 101 for the NBA.
There's more than 3. I just had to only give 3.
But you have to yes, it's only a half-hour show. So the last one for now.
Come on, we can take the over on the half hour. We all know how this is going to go. But certainly for the NBA, this probably should be number 1, but it's a betting 101, so I couldn't. But maximize the morphs. Okay, we talked about that a little bit in baseball, how good teams get cold, bad teams get hot. In NBA, that happens a lot over the course of the season, and a lot of times it comes with injuries, players coming in out of the lineup. A key role player gets hurt, the markets yawn, the team goes 1-9 ATS their next 10 games,
Yeah.
Superstar comes back, the markets over-adjust. They go 0-5 ATS as soon as they come back. This happens all the time in the NBA. If you can maximize the morphs, a team that was playing at a level here and now they're playing down here, or vice versa, for any reason, you bet on them early. You can ride those morphs for weeks on end. That's one of the reasons I love the NBA.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you, Teddy. Okay, we've got college basketball next. So much fun to watch, but I feel like people bet on college basketball willy-nilly sometimes, especially with much smaller schools or super early in the season when other sports are going on. What are some edges you can give us for college hoops?
Look, of all the sports we're going to talk about, there is no sport that's more intimidating for beginners than college hoops because there are so many teams. I remember my first year in Vegas, all right? I was lost. I'm like, this is a whole conference I never heard of. This is another conference I never heard of. I don't know any of these teams. I don't know any of these coaches.
Yeah.
It is extremely intimidating for beginners. So what do? Start small, right? Don't try to handicap the entirety of college bet. Find a conference, find 2 or 3. Keep it small to begin with. That would be absolutely my number 1 piece of advice.
Okay.
In addition, besides starting small, break down the season. All right. College hoops really has very definitive breakdown parts of the season. You have non-conference play, you have early conference play, you have late conference play, and you have the postseason. Note that decent teams that do particularly well or particularly poorly in any one of those 4 quartiles likely to be undervalued or overvalued in the net. A team kills it in non-conference play, guess what? Going into conference play, they're likely to be an overvalued commodity. A team is terrible in the first 5 or 6 games of conference play, guess what? The market's going to crash on them. You may find value with that team over the back half of conference play. So start small and break the season down into parts, which is, I guess, a long answer for number 1.
Okay. All right, number 2.
So I talked about how teams can go on these, in college hoops, a team that was very hot or very cold, which often happens, will then often be undervalued or overvalued through the next quartile of the season. That said, underrated teams against the spread can legitimately hold their value from day 1 in college hoops right through March.
Okay.
Just went back and looked for this season. There's more than a dozen teams that are about 67% plus against the spread, just betting them blindly. If you knock that down to 65% plus, you're talking about 30 plus teams. Yeah. Same story with the bet against, where you can find 20 to 30 teams. If you identify them early, these are miserable squads. They are never going to live up to expectations. Look at the Tar Heels this year. North Carolina, a classic example.
Oh my God!
All you can do is lose money with that. So it's a very, it's the same story with bet-ons versus bet against. If you can find those teams early, you can ride them again and again and again. And that's what I love to do. The more wins you can get out of one team, it makes your workload manageable.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Last but not least, I think it is
Minty has frozen on us. That being said, let me talk a little college hoops. We'll try to get Minty back. There was one more thing I wanted to talk about with College Hoops 101, and that, of course, is line shopping. There are so many games in college basketball, so many games. Every night, you have games decided by a point, a half point, sides, totals, first half, second halves. If ever there's a sport that you have to line shop, college hoops is that sport. It makes all the difference. Getting an extra half point every day, every game matters. A point matters. So what I tell everyone, you're going to start an account in a sportsbook? Great. Split it in half, start an account of 2 sportsbooks. You're going to go to 2 sportsbooks? Great. Split those in half and have 4 sportsbooks. The more books you have, the more line shopping you can do. The more line shopping you can do, the more games you're going to win by a half point, and the fewer games you're going to lose by a half point. And it really is just that simple. Line shop.
Teddy, I've turned my mic on. I have a question for you.
Sure.
Talking about half points. Me and Gianni spoke about buying half points in football. What are your thoughts about buying half points in basketball?
I would never, ever, 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 ever buy a half point. Never done it. Not even thinking. Not even a maybe. Am I going to lay minus 120 to get a half point when, because I live in Las Vegas and because I have all day to find my line, I'm going to find my number somewhere. I'm not going to buy it and lay 120. The more outs you have, the less interest you have in buying points. And again, basketball, there are key numbers in basketball. If you talk about football, the key numbers, of course, are 3 and 7. In basketball, the key numbers 1, 2, 3, and 7. That's where teams stop fouling in theory. But in terms of buying the half points, I wouldn't even consider it, Lawrence, in hoops. I can't think of a scenario in which I would consider it. What about you?
I don't really buy half points in anything. So in basketball, it seems a little silly. What about teasers? You do the 4-point teasers in basketball?
So I'll tell you a story. When I first, the way I got into this side of the business is by I started out as a bookie in Ann Arbor. All right. And we weren't any good. This is mid 90s. We had no idea what we were doing. All right. Literally, no, neither one of us, me and my partner, neither one of us had ever been to Vegas. We didn't really know the rules that well. And we gave out, obviously, there's 6-point teasers in NFL. We knew that. We gave out 6-point teasers in the NBA, not knowing the difference for a full season. 6-point teasers, not 4-point, 6-point. You know how many people beat us, Prez?
Nobody. That's with 2 more points than what you're getting. So I'm not a fan of NBA teasers. I'm not a fan of college hoops teasers. There's a place for teasers in the betting world. That place is the NFL, where 3s and 7s are paramount, and the teasers allow you to take control of the math and give yourself positive expectation situations. Teasers and hoops, I wouldn't even consider them. And again, from my experience, I don't know anyone that beats them. Yeah. I don't understand the teasers in basketball. I don't know the numbers, and I'm sure they do exist, but, what is the difference between a team at, -2 and at -5? What's, or -2 and -3 even? What's the percentage difference?
Well, again, there are charts out there, and I don't have one in front of me right now, but with every half point you get off the closing number, in theory, you're increasing your win percentage by X amount. A 50, let's just say it's a 50-50 wager. You got it to pick 'em, and now the line is -3, and you still have pick 'em in your pocket. So you have the best of it. Instead of a 50-50 wager, now it's more like a 55-45 wager. You do have a legitimate edge.
That's actually one of the interesting things. And I was talking to Koken about this. Where do you get away from the money line? If it's -1.5, -120, are you -1.5 or -120 in a basketball? Are you taking the money line? Where do you stop?
So I tend to bet point spreads more than money lines. When I get involved with the money line, it's only going to be in that exactly -1.5. And hey, maybe they win the game by 1, so I'd rather lay 120 here. I tend to do more point spreads. I really do. What about you?
Hi, Minty.
Minty's back, but I'll just
Hi.
answer your question quick and then put me back
Yes,
on
keep
mute.
going.
Teddy, I agree. I go to about minus 120 and minus 1.5. That's sort of where the cutoff is. Once you get to minus 125, you're actually paying too much.
Yeah. And Lawrence, if you could just sing like you were singing in my ear before, so for everyone,
got
so they can all hear what I was
it.
hearing. While I was like, I'm going to end this podcast. You keep singing.
Okay, ready? When I was a child, I had a fever out of the corner of my eye.
Now, imagine trying to like concentrate, and that's going. I don't want to give out bad info. I got to think about my answers. It's not like I have everything memorized.
Is there anybody
Did you really
out
just
there?
sing that for everybody for us?
Yes,
I'm muting myself.
Oh,
Minty, finish the show.
All right, where did we leave off? Where
College
did you leave off, Prez, Teddy? I so apologize. College hoops? You're still on college hoops?
Well, Lawrence was asking a question. I had one more thing to talk about in college hoops, and we'll talk college football and NFL.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
I think I did already. Line shop. I was talking about line shopping. Line
Yes,
shopping, line
I
shop
did
some
hear
more,
that
and line
part.
shop some more. College. There are more games decided by a half-point ATS in college hoops than all the other sports combined. So
Yes.
not combined, but recognize that the ability to line shop is paramount in college hoops, even more than any other sport, because there is variance in college hoops, more so than in just about any other sport as well.
Got it. Love it. Thank you. Okay, so we move on to our second to last sport, college football. This is Kelly and Vegas' favorite sport to bet on. I will bet on it as well. However, college football's point spreads and totals are just so like lopsided and crazy, and it's just so different from the pros. So what are your suggestions for those who want to win at betting this sport?
And I don't disagree with anyone that says that college football is their favorite sport. I mean, college football in my mind is as beatable as anything out there. It really is. Starting point, college football starting point. This team's going up. This team's going down year by year. My starting point is the state of the program. All right. How many coaches have they had last 5 years? How many coordinators? How many coordinator changes have they had the last 5 years? How many different recruiting strategies have they had? How many different offensive playbooks have they had? Continuity matters in college football right from the get-go. And a lot of times people put so much effort. Oh, look at this hot new coach. Oh, look at that hot new coach.
Mm-hmm.
The hot new coaches are not where I'm looking to put my money on. I want the coach in the third year who has a system in place, not the guy who's getting all the hype. Right.
Good point.
So it's the state of the program is where I'm starting in college football. Where they've been and how much change there's been is 100% where your initial college football ratings are going to come from.
Okay, perfect. And number two?
Coming into the college football season, you're going to hear a ton about returning starters. And all the early season power ratings are based on how many starters are back.
Right.
I think returning starters are way overrated.
Okay, why?
If you have 19 returning starters from a team that went 1-11, guess what? They all still stink. All right?
True.
If you have 3 returning starters at Ohio State, guess what? Everybody that's going to fill in and get the starting job is good enough to play in the NFL or at least come close. So you see teams get wildly over and undervalued based on returning starters sometimes. It's about the state of the program, not the state of the starters. And, of course, starters are only one piece of the puzzle. How many guys returned with playing experience from last year? That's the stat that matters. Not how many guys started game. How many guys saw the field, all right? In smaller conferences, returning starters do matter more. In bigger conferences, the talent differentials are more dramatic. I don't worry nearly as much about returning starters, even from the get-go.
Okay, good advice. And that third piece of advice.
Well, you talk about position groups to pay attention to in college. I want a defense that can get a stop in the fourth quarter. And we all pay so much attention. Oh, this is a pretty offense. Oh, look at the quarterback. I'm less worried about quarterbacks than I am with quarterback, offensive line, wide receiver combos. Right? You have a good quarterback with a good OL and receivers that can make plays. Guess what? You have a team you're going to make money with, flat out. The quarterback himself, not so much. You see these quarterbacks that stick around for their senior year, and they lost their top 4 guys they threw to last year, and 4 of the 5 starting offensive linemen graduate, and you end up with, I don't know, a team like the Washington Huskies last year or something. The underachiever times. So Yeah, I want defenses that get fourth quarter stops, and I want the QB OL wide receiver combination. Those are meaningful to me in terms of beating college, identifying teams that I want to be betting on versus betting against in college football from the get-go.
Good stuff. And last but not least, my favorite sport to watch, to bet on, to keep up with, the NFL. So far, the only sport that hasn't gotten postponed or rescheduled by this 2020 virus yet. So, Teddy, give us some words of wisdom on betting the NFL.
Sure. I mean, the NFL, much like in baseball, we talk about where do the baseball numbers come from. The NFL numbers, the point spreads, they're all about the advanced metrics. All right. It's not so much your win-loss record. It's not so much your quarterback rating. The advanced metrics, these are the stats the markets pay attention to. Yards per play. Yards per play allowed on offense, or gained on offense, yards per play allowed on defense. You can break it down into yards per rush allowed on offense and allowed on defense. You can break it down into QB rating on offense and QB rating allowed on defense. But yards per play, to me, that's the stat that the wise guys pay a lot of attention to, and the wise guys dominate the markets. The other stat that is something that gets a lot of attention is turnover differential. And as a handicapper, it's your job to determine, is a team with positive or negative turnover differential, is that systemic or is it random? All right. If you have Tom Brady at quarterback and a good offensive line in front of him and a defense that can create takeaways, guess what? You're supposed to have a positive turnover differential every year. And the markets don't often value that. They're always random. No, you know, the teams that don't make mistakes are going to win the turnover battle. When you have a QB that turns the ball over on every other, if you have Jameis Winston behind center, you know, and you're leading the league in turnovers and your defense is not creating takeaways, you can look systemically. This team is likely to lose the turnover battle on a consistent basis. They become a bet against team. Similarly, you know, a defense is creating takeaways every week, a pass rush that's there every week. Those tend to be bet on. So your yards per play on offense and defense, your turnover differential, and assessing whether that's systemic or random, that'll help you make money in the NFL right from the get-go.
Good stuff. All right, number 2 for the NFL.
We're talking about spots in all of these sports. You know, I identify the spots in the NBA. I don't know that there is a league that's going to price the spots as heavily as the NFL. I mean, the markets notice the spots, but they work. And that's why the markets adjust to the spots. The letdown coming off a huge win. The look ahead, you know, the huge divisional game next week. The sandwich spot off a big game with another big game on deck. The step-up spot, you know, we've been playing a bunch of bottom feeders. Now we have the one big game. Can they step up and do it? The step-down spot, facing a group of elite opponents. Now they're going to step down in class and face a weakling. Are they really ready to cover minus 12 in this game? These spots matters. And note the strength of schedule. One thing I haven't talked about nearly enough on this pod is, especially early and mid-season, you will see some dramatic differences between the toughness of schedule one team faced and the toughness another team faced. Don't be fooled by a team that's 7-1 and they've beaten 7 lottery teams, you know, and now they got to play somebody real over the back half of the campaign. Strength of schedule is something you absolutely want to pay attention to every bit as much as those spots.
So true. I think a lot of people forget about strength of schedule as well. Okay, so number 3, last one for the NFL.
Well, in the NFL, I mean, I talked about my core philosophy. You want to bet on good teams and bet against bad teams. And that's very real. But let's talk about different ways to do it. All right. The NFL has so many betting opportunities. You have teasers, you have in-game, you have the props, the player props. You need context behind the trends and angles, not just sides and totals. But with all of the NFL betting options, you're talking about betting 101. Don't be foolish. The NFL is a difficult sport to beat. This is not your sport to go balls to the wall every Sunday and bet everything you have and get it all in on in-game and props and all of that. NFL is you find a handful of games that you think you have a positive expectation in, and you get the best of the number and you hope for the best. At the end of the season, you know, again, our goals here are realistic and reasonable. You're not going to win 90% of your bets or 80. You have a monster season, you might get 65. If we win 60% of our bets in any sport in any season, we're not just happy, we're thrilled. That's great. 60% makes a whole bunch of money over the long term for everybody. So be aware the percentages that you're looking for, they don't have to be astronomical. If you go 55, you win 11 out of 20, you're going to walk away with a profit at the end of the season. As long, and I haven't talked anything about money management on this whole podcast. I'm not gonna for this podcast. That's for a different podcast. But as long as you have reasonable money management, you win 11 out of 20 games, you're going to make money doing this.
Absolutely. Good stuff, Teddy. Amazing information from Teddy Covers. Teddy, thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. And to everyone, thank you that took the time out of their day to watch this. We'll be on same time, same place next week, Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at WagerTalk TV on YouTube. Do not forget to subscribe and also click the little bell icon to receive notifications whenever we go live or post a new video. See you all then. Have a great week.